a Caribbean island paradise, and a volcano that wakes after lying dormant for centuries. 10,500 lives are at stake. Volcanologists rush to the scene. Then, a catastrophic eruption sends an avalanche of red-hot rock and ash down the mountain. In the chaos, no one knows how many are dead, or why the volcano takes the islanders by surprise. One man predicted this disaster. But why wasn't he listened to? Disasters don't just happen. They're triggered by a chain of critical events. Unravel the clues and count down those final seconds from disaster. Eastern Caribbean, the island of Montserrat. This tiny island is one of the last remaining outposts of the British Empire. It's 10 miles long and 6 miles wide, more than twice the size of Manhattan. It's a haven for the rich and famous, and home to many recording studios used by well-known musicians. The island is celebrated for its natural beauty and tranquil, easygoing lifestyle. 80% of the island's infrastructure lies in the shadow of Soufrière Hills, a mountain 3,000 feet above sea level that dominates the southern half of the island. Most of the population live and work in the capital, Plymouth, or farm the rich, fertile soil along the mountain. On the northern side lies the village of Farrell's Yard, home to Delia Pond.
It is a paradise, and because everybody is so friendly towards one another, we never have a care in the world. I guess we are brought up in a way to accept life for what it is.
A mother of 6, Delia has lived on Montserrat her entire life. She rents a small plot of land where she grows vegetables to sell on neighboring islands. David Lee is an American missionary who has lived on Montserrat for 15 years. He's also an amateur cameraman and has filmed everything from carnivals to local sporting events.
It's off the beaten path. It's the way the Caribbean used to be. The people are genuinely friendly. And we came for a month and checked it out, and it was just like they said, and we never left.
But a hidden menace is beneath this tropical Garden of Eden. The lush vegetation and productive soil belies a lethal reality. The island is volcanic. Montserrat sits directly on a geological subduction zone, one of the most seismically active parts of the planet's crust. The North Atlantic tectonic plate, moving westward, sinks beneath the Caribbean plate. As it descends, it melts and forms magma, which over time finds its way to the Earth's surface, creating a string of volcanic islands known as the Lesser Antilles. But Montserrat has shown no signs of major volcanic activity for approximately 370 years. The only evidence of volcanicity are springs hot enough to boil an egg, sprouting from the slopes of Soufrière Hills. Then, on July 18, 1995, everything changes. The islanders hear a deafening noise, similar to the sound of a jet engine coming from the mountain. Leroy Slim Daly, a local farmer and part-time cab driver, is in Plymouth that day.
People started to realize that there was something happening in the mountains. Most people thought it was a plane, a jet which was passing, but the sound just didn't go away.
Over the next week, the volcano continues to rumble. 10,500 people now face a threat they never expected. For David Lee, it's a chance to film a much more dramatic subject.
I decided to document the volcano because I had just taken a sabbatical. We'd been really busy with a lot of things for about 10 years, so I had nothing else to do. I had a nice little camera. The volcano started to erupt. Little did I know that would turn into a vocation.
As news of the volcanic activity spreads worldwide, scientists arrive on the island. The event provides them with a unique opportunity to observe a volcano returning to life after centuries of dormancy. Among them is a recent graduate from Indiana State University, volcanologist Rob Watts. He regards the trip as the opportunity of a lifetime.
My dream job is to monitor a volcano, to see a volcano in action, and just incredible. Here's nature at work.
Scientists set up a temporary observatory and install 9 seismometers that record time, duration, and intensity of earthquakes. The deafening sound being monitored is called a phreatic eruption, coming from part of an old crater known as Castle Peak. Groundwater heated by magma rising deep inside the volcano evaporates, building a massive head of steam that bursts through fractures in the rock. The team watches and waits for the volcano to come back to life. A month after the initial activity, David Lee climbs to the western edge of the crater, overlooking Castle Peak.
Anybody watching this? Don't be stupid enough to come up here. As I began to walk up to the crater edge, I started to roll the camera. The whole mountain is quivering. It's spewing right now. As I walked out through what was then rainforest, here was this phreatic eruption taking place, and it was just like unbelievable, and stones and pebbles were falling, and it was roaring. I had no idea if the whole mountain could blow up. There's no doubt that down below there is magma that wants to come out.
Then the volcano emits another deafening blast.
I turned and started to hightail down the mountain. Okay, Lord, put my trust and faith in you. You're my refuge and strength in every trouble. That was my last trip up there, folks.
David's adopted home has revealed a new and dangerous character.
Do I look scared? Let me take it and put it on auto. Now do I look scared? I'm not out of here yet. I'm only down about 600 feet. If the whole thing went, wouldn't have a chance up here. The whole top of the mountain was just shivering, 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 up and down under your feet. And you could feel this awesome power underneath vibrating, wanting to come out.
A massive eruption is on the horizon, and it's one that will take the islanders by surprise. Deep within the Soufrière Hills volcano on the island of Montserrat, red-hot lava is rising rapidly. But scientists are unsure whether the volcano is entering another dangerous phase of activity. A month after the first blast, another large phreatic eruption fires a cloud of ash, mud, and steam into the air. The vibration rocks Montserrat. The locals stare nervously at the darkening skies as the southern part of the island is showered in a thick cloud of volcanic dust.
Ready, go! Where is Darius?
30 minutes later, the billowing pall of gray ash clears. And as the sun breaks through, it reveals an uncanny scene. The capital, Plymouth, and everything west of Soufrière Hills is covered in a dense layer of ash. The locals christen the day Ash Monday. Fearing the next eruption could be worse, the Montserratian government and the British military evacuate 6,000 people from their homes on the slopes of the mountain. Plymouth and the surrounding village is empty as the islanders journey 5 miles to the hastily organized shelters in the northern part of the island. but the exodus creates chaos. The north is underdeveloped. Living conditions are basic and eventually become squalid.
We were housing schools and churches. You had like 40 to 50 people to a church. You have the young, the old, the Christian, the drunkard, the infant, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
The islanders are desperate to return home. With 80% of Montserrat's infrastructure in the south, many are granted access during the day in order to keep the island functioning. Delia Pond's produce is now a vital resource for the islanders camped in the north. She and her family tend to a plot of land within easy sight of the volcano summit. Each day they take precautions in case of another eruption.
Whenever we get to the farm in the morning, we always turn the vehicle facing towards the road, and we always leave the keys in the car in case of emergency. So we just get in and take off.
Their planned escape route takes them north to the sanctuary of a small hill. On the slopes above Delia's plot, another farmer, Harry Lewis, rents several acres. He and his wife prepare and plant the land. Like Delia, it's their only livelihood. By September, the islanders return home to see a new sight on the horizon. A large mound of rock and ash is growing on the summit of the volcano. This bizarre development confirms the scientists' worst fears. It's known as a lava dome, an unstable bulbous mass formed by successive deposits of thick, viscous lava. If the sides of this lava dome collapse, a deadly mixture of red-hot rock and ash will cascade down the mountainside in what's called a pyroclastic flow. These lethal avalanches can travel at speeds of up to 100 miles per hour. Temperatures at their core can reach over 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit. They've caused over 40,000 deaths in the last century alone, and are responsible for some of the most deadly disasters in recorded history. It was a pyroclastic flow that incinerated over 28,000 people on the Caribbean island of Martinique in 1902, and 2,000 inhabitants of Pompeii in 79 AD. Faced with this threat, the islanders return north. Rob Watts and the scientists keep an eye on the lava dome.
While I was measuring, I could sit and watch the dome and watch the activity, you know, watch big rockfalls spoil away from the dome. I just became fascinated with the whole way it was growing.
But 5 months after Soufrière Hills first erupted, the growth of the lava dome slows, quieting the volcanic activity. The government allows the evacuees to return to their homes once again, and normal life on the island resumes. But the volcano isn't finished yet. Nearly 3 months later, it fires its first pyroclastic flow down the eastern slope of the mountain, heading for the coastline. The flow travels for over a mile. No one is hurt, but it's clear that the volcanic activity is intensifying. Again, the government orders an evacuation for the northern part of the island. But the constant coming and going creates confusion and anger among the evacuees. An exclusion zone is established in the south of the island. Everything south of Plymouth and west of the airport is restricted. But the threat level of the volcano is still unclear, and roadblocks aren't strictly enforced. The islanders still come and go. Local filmmaker David Lee heads inside the exclusion zone to document the events.
I figured I was doing all the right things, that I understood what was happening on the volcano, and that I knew the best and safest places to be. And I would, you know, one way or another sneak around the checkpoint to be able to get some of the images that I was able to get, some of the very interesting pyroclastic flows coming down virgin valleys and stuff like that. Really incredible things. I'm in town.
But his bravado soon gets him into serious danger. While driving north from the capital, Plymouth, the volcano erupts violently.
When I looked up, I saw this tremendous black cloud coming across the sky, pitch black.
The blast showers the southwest side of the island in a thick cloud of ash and mud. In a matter of seconds, day turns to night.
Pitch black with lightning and thunder going everywhere around you, just striking everything on the roads, on the trees, on the houses. That was the most concerned I ever was for my life. It's high noon. But who would ever believe it? Can't see a thing. Can't see a thing. We're trapped in here. It'd be nice to get out of this area alive.
14 minutes later, the ash cloud clears and David escapes. But the volcano still isn't finished. Another blast will hit this island paradise. For nearly 2 years, volcanic activity on the Caribbean island of Montserrat has been escalating. Scientists observe the intensifying activity up close with anticipation. With the pressure growing, the British Geological Survey sends volcanologist Sue Loughlin to the site. A postgraduate from Durham University in Britain, Sue helps monitor the situation.
I stepped out of the airport and looked up, and there was this great big steaming volcano. Within minutes of arriving, I was watching pyroclastic flows coming down the flanks of the lava dome, so it was quite a sharp introduction to what was going on here.
The lava dome has developed a pointed spire, making it unstable. Magma is accumulating near the crater. Scientists install tilt meters on the slopes to monitor the swelling and contraction of the dome. Pyroclastic flows most likely occur when the dome deflates. June 25th, 3 a.m. Seismometers at the observatory jump to life. That night, David Lee and his son helped monitor them.
I actually videoed the seismic machine that night, and these hybrid earthquakes were every 50 seconds. I remember saying to my son, you know, it looks like this thing's gonna have a baby. It looks like it's birth pain.
By 7 a.m., the seismographs are still recording the activity. But the weather is bad, and little can be seen of the volcano through the wet fog. Scientists take to the air to monitor the activity closely. The imminent danger is broadcast to the islanders on the local radio station.
All people inside the exclusion zone, including Bethel, Brams Village, White's Yard, and Spanish Point, should leave immediately.
Delia Pond and her family are among several farmers who are tending their fields inside the exclusion zone. But Delia leaves her radio in the car, and the mist conceals the mountain directly above her. She's unaware the volcano is about to blow.
1 minute, it's clear, and then it fogs over again. We can see the helicopter going overhead, but we cannot see the mountain.
Near Delia's plot, Harry Lewis and his family are also working. Meanwhile, David Lee makes his way to a small hill north of the volcano to film the ash flows running down the valley. He immediately realizes the farmers are in danger.
These people here are in
about the worst place you could be, because the pyroclastic flows would come over the top of that ridge there before they could even probably get in their cars.
Here they were in the field, and right above them in the valley, there were small pyroclastic flows coming down that same valley.
12:45 p.m. Seismographs at the observatory record a continuous tremor. In Plymouth, sirens are sounded, and the local radio station updates the community on the developing situation. Magma, rising rapidly inside the volcano, expands the lava dome to its final breaking point. (12:55 p.m.) Soufrière Hills erupts. David Lee captures the enormous explosion on his camera.
It was bigger than we'd ever seen before. And everybody was like, oh my God, they knew there were people in places they shouldn't be.
I'm gonna move out because it's way over our heads here.
I just grabbed my camera and then made a mad dash around the entire island.
And as you can see, we've had a major explosion.
The eruption ejects an avalanche of superheated gas and rock, cascading down a valley on the northern slopes. It heads towards the farmers still working in the fields. As Delia and her family prepare to leave, she opens the gate and catches sight of the white-hot avalanche bearing down on them.
As I put my hand on the gate, it become a routine thing that I always look back at the mountain, and I just see the mountain almost halfway down coming at us.
James, we have to go right now.
Delia makes a conscious effort to keep calm.
You're looking at something which is danger coming at you. I don't think it is wise to alarm the next person who would then turn around and cause a panic.
But her husband James panics and immediately takes a left turn out of the gate, heading downhill.
We need to go uphill.
As a volcanic wave gains ground, James fumbles with the gears.
For some reason, he cannot get the car in reverse.
And they need to get to higher ground.
So then I have to say, all right, don't panic, take your time.
Okay, okay.
And I counted like 1, 2, 3, reverse.
Suddenly, Harry Lewis drives toward them in search of his loved ones. In the panic, his family made a run for it. And in a bid to rescue them, he drives downhill into the path of the rolling inferno.
We must get out of here.
Hurry up!
Delia and her family drive half a mile uphill, directly north of the volcano. They look back and see their fields engulfed in clouds of red-hot rock and ash.
You're looking into Armageddon because you cannot see anything. Everything is just clouds and smoke.
In the village of Harris, almost 2 miles northeast of Soufrière Hills, Slim Daly is playing pool. He's unaware of the drama unfolding. But as the heat from the raging inferno reaches a gas station nearby, the gas ignites and the building explodes.
We heard a noise. Immediately I realized something was desperately wrong.
Slim sees the white-hot avalanche cascading down the hill. He runs to his car and heads for higher ground.
Then the darkness started to come over the road in front of me, and the heat, I started to feel the heat. At that point, I was scared, not terrified. I was scared.
On the hilltop, Slim watches the apocalyptic scene below.
And looked at the pyroclastic flows destroying the whole villages, the whole area. right down to very close to the airport.
But as he watches, the volcanic wave changes direction. Now it's heading straight for him. Slim Daly will soon come face to face with the wrath of Soufrière Hills. A catastrophic eruption rocks the volcanic island of Montserrat. Within minutes, a red-hot avalanche of rock and ash flows down Soufrière Hills, incinerating everything in its path. Islanders run for their lives, including Slim Daly. As Slim heads north, away from the volcano, he warns an elderly man of the imminent danger. It isn't long before they're overwhelmed by a dense, toxic cloud of hot ash and sulfurous gas.
So you couldn't run because you couldn't see where you were going. Even if you put your hands to your face, it was impossible to see them.
The heat makes it hard to breathe, so they drop to their knees for air.
We're not gonna die.
He kept on saying that we were going to die.
No, we're not gonna die, Papa.
I tried to console him and said to him, no, we're not going to die, we're not going to die.
Meanwhile, survivors gather on a hill 2.5 miles north of the airport. Scientist Rob Watts is among them.
We could see this huge pyroclastic flow literally pulsing around the bend at the bottom of the mountain.
A superheated tsunami of molten rock and ash stops 164 feet from the sea at the southern edge of the airstrip, just inside the exclusion zone. David Lee captures the scene on his camera.
That's where the pyroclastic flow came to.
By the time I got there, there were people coming from the north knowing that something had happened. But it was something to see, and knowing, all of us knowing, not who and not how many, but we knew that people had been killed.
1:10 p.m., a daring helicopter rescue begins. Islanders, unable to escape by road, are stranded in villages northwest of the volcano. The chopper must fly dangerously close to the red-hot billowing ash cloud in order to reach them. One of the first rescues is made in Harris, where a small group of islanders are trapped. Miraculously, Slim Daly is among them.
That thing came down like a bullet.
He is flown to safety. By the end of the day, 4 people are confirmed dead. 17 others are missing. The islanders reel in shock, fearing many more may have been killed.
It was a day that shook all of Montserrat because it's a very small place and everybody's related to somebody and everybody knows everybody, so it was a very tough day.
Immediately after the eruption, a team of scientists from the observatory explores why it exploded with such lethal energy. They gather eyewitness statements, photographic evidence, and data recorded from their instruments to build a comprehensive sequence of events. The eyewitnesses paint a disturbing picture.
I saw it spreading and I see the way it fans out. It just bubbles up.
Despite being aware of the dangers, the pyroclastic flow caught islanders within the exclusion zone by surprise. The sheer speed and scale of the avalanche was overwhelming.
As it's coming towards you, it's like big stormy wave, but spreading out. It's spreading wider and wider.
The combination of data recorded at the observatory, photographic evidence, and eyewitness statements points to a complex sequence of blasts that created not 1, but 3 pyroclastic flows, with each flow increasing in speed and intensity. 4 days after the eruption, with activity in the volcano subsiding, the team gets their first glimpse into the crater. Although it's still hazardous, they fly over the summit of the mountain. What they see confirms their suspicions. The lava dome has collapsed over the north wall of the crater down a valley known as Mosquito Gut. The ejected material covered 1.5 miles of land, turning the north end and the east side of Soufrière Hills into a wasteland. The third and final pyroclastic flow traveled faster and spread further than the other two. It destroyed 150 homes. Using video footage and data recorded on the seismographs, the team calculates that the third flow reached speeds of up to 180 miles per hour. Islanders wouldn't have been able to escape from its path. To confirm this theory, the team needs to get on the ground. But the disaster zone is still too dangerous, and they have to wait for the ash and rock to cool. Back at the observatory, scientists analyzed data from the tilt meters that were tracking changes in the inflationary and deflationary cycle of the volcano. They provide an extraordinary insight. Just prior to the eruption, the lava dome expands massively, swelling over the north rim of the crater. Then, between 12:40 and 12:50 p.m., the volcano rapidly deflates. This destabilizes the outer layer of the dome. At 12:57, it collapses over the north crater wall, creating the first pyroclastic flow seen cascading down Mosquito Gut. Nearly 3 minutes later, more volcanic material deep inside the lava dome is ejected, and a second larger avalanche roars down the valley. 1:08 p.m., the third and most dangerous eruption catapults a column of ash 45,000 feet into the air, and a lethal mixture of red-hot debris flows down the northern slopes of the mountain. It's the most violent volcanic activity on the island in centuries. Several days after the eruption, it's safe for the team to enter the disaster zone on foot. As a precaution, they wear protective suits, since much of the ground is still extremely hot. By surveying the scar left in the lava dome and mapping the volume of the flow in the disaster zone, the scientists calculate nearly 14 million cubic feet of lava was ejected down the volcano. It's enough to fill Rome's Colosseum 5.5 times. The scene is like a modern-day Pompeii. The flows were over 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit. 150 houses lie buried in 100 feet of volcanic rock and ash. Asphalt on the roads has melted. Wooden posts and doors have burst into flames. Windows have melted. The cooling lava flow reveals vital clues about the force of the third blast.
Some of the blocks in the pyroclastic flow were enormous, bigger than a house. But one thing we did see on these blocks is friction marks. So it became clear that the blocks weren't rolling down the hill, they were bouncing so hard that they were actually partially melting. So you can imagine these enormous avalanches of bouncing, crashing boulders and rocks.
But this scene holds the key to a deeper mystery. Why did the pyroclastic flow take so many by surprise? The islanders thought the ash and rock would stay within the valley, as it did in the preceding months. But they were wrong. After the first and second flows, the valley itself quickly filled with debris. The changing topography allowed the third, more violent flow to ride unimpeded over the path carved out by the other two. As it rampaged down the mountain, gathering momentum, it broke over the sides of the valley, and travel a total of 4 miles.
What the farmers who had made these plans hadn't anticipated is that the topography that they were familiar with could change so very quickly.
But further investigation of the disaster zone presents the team with a phenomenon rarely witnessed. Above and beyond the destruction left by the heavy deposits of the flow, they find signs of severe scorching spreading out across the plains of Farrell's Yard. It's evidence of a pyroclastic surge. As the flow's rock and ash cascade down the mountainside, the rock breaks apart, releasing superheated volcanic gases. This gas rapidly expands and acts as a white-hot hurricane, riding over the heavier debris of the flow itself and burning everything in its path.
It had melted windows, it had melted paint, it had twisted vegetation and fence posts, it had melted roofing tiles.
The surge reached temperatures up to 750 degrees Fahrenheit and traveled over 80 miles per hour. But it had another deadly attribute. It behaved in an unpredictable manner.
Pyroclastic flows tend to remain in valleys. However, the surge above that can detach from the avalanche. Particularly it bends in the valley.
Halfway down the mountain, the valley makes a distinctive change in direction. As the surge hit this bend, instead of turning, it detached from the pyroclastic flow and headed straight across the farming plains of Farrell's Yard. This explains the final mystery. Days after the disaster, the bodies of Harry Lewis's family are discovered. All 3 were fatally burned, yet they were well beyond the clutches of the pyroclastic flow. Expecting high ground to provide safety, they ran to a small hill just north of where they were farming. But the pyroclastic surge outpaced them.
People thought they could outrun it, people thought they could go uphill to avoid it, but that wasn't the case. The momentum that it builds up coming downhill enabled it to travel uphill. So cars, vehicles, trees can all be moved by pyroclastic surges.
In the intense heat of the surge, the body suffers a neurogenic shock and the nervous system shuts down. Death is almost instantaneous. In total, 19 people lose their lives in the disaster. Yet despite this tragedy, it's amazing many more didn't perish. The scale of the eruption and the devastation caused by its pyroclastic flows took the islanders by surprise. But 10 years earlier, this man predicted a similar scenario. Professor Jeff Wadge worked at the University of West Indies Seismic Research Unit. In 1986, he and his colleague Michael Isaacs were commissioned by the United Nations to assess the risks posed by the Montserrat volcano. Over 70% of the 40,000 people killed by pyroclastic flows in the last century have occurred in the Lesser Antilles, the string of Caribbean islands that includes Montserrat. Their research was designed to help the island's government make contingency plans in the event of an eruption. Wadge visited the authorities with an update on his report.
I told them what I was doing. I told them that I would be preparing a report on the likely future behavior of the volcano. I did that, submitted my report, expecting them to take some notice of it.
Professor Wadge and his colleague predicted that Soufrière Hills could erupt with serious consequences, and they advised moving Montserrat's infrastructure to the north of the island. But the government never acted upon their advice. Soufrière Hills on the island of Montserrat has erupted violently, killing 19 islanders. But could more have been done to avoid this tragedy? In the inquest that followed, the jury blamed the deaths on the government failing to provide adequate infrastructure and farmland for the displaced islanders. But 10 years earlier, Professor Wadge and his colleague Michael Isaacs had advised moving much of Montserrat's infrastructure to the north of the island. They insisted Soufrière Hills be regarded as an active volcano. Although it hadn't erupted for centuries, it displayed seismic activity in the form of earthquakes. These quakes occurred most recently in the 1930s and again in the 1960s. This was evidence of the volcano trying, but failing, to erupt once every 30 years. Wadge predicted that a potentially catastrophic eruption might occur in the mid-1990s, 3 decades after the last intense seismic activity.
The report gave details of several different scenarios. It could range from a relatively small eruption that was contained within the crater to one that would then spill out of the crater and threaten the slopes of Plymouth.
But forecasting volcanic eruptions is an imperfect science, and Wadge was only able to attach a 1% chance to his prediction. Faced with such odds, the government failed to act. But 10 years after the report was published, the professor's predictions came true. Now, by rewinding the events of that fateful day, we can explain why and how 19 islanders died. June 25th, 1997, 10 hours to disaster. Volatile magma rises rapidly up the magma chamber deep inside the volcano. It places the lava dome under pressure, causing it to inflate and deflate continuously. 7 hours to disaster. Local farmers, including Delia Pond and her family, drive through checkpoints into the exclusion zone. 11 minutes to disaster. The first volcanic eruption occurs. The outer part of the lava dome collapses, and a pyroclastic flow cascades over the northern wall of the crater. 8 minutes to disaster. A second eruption occurs, and a larger avalanche of rock and ash pours down the same valley. 1:08 p.m. A third massive eruption sends more volatile material racing down the volcano. It spills over the valley walls at 80 miles per hour. A pyroclastic surge breaks away from the flow and spreads across farmland. It sweeps through 3 villages, killing 7 people. Heavy debris continues down Mosquito Gut, destroying more villages and claiming 12 more lives. In just 25 minutes, 19 islanders are dead.
We made a calculated risk, and I just have to give thanks to the Almighty we survived.
1 month later, with the island still reeling from the disaster, one of Professor Wadge's more extreme scenarios comes true. Soufrière Hills blasts another pyroclastic flow down its slopes. It hits the abandoned town of Plymouth and completely destroys it. There was no loss of life, but it could have been a much different scenario. Had the volcano erupted this violently initially, it could have killed thousands. Soufrière Hills has been active for more than 10 years. Today, 4,500 islanders still live on Montserrat, including Delia Pond, Slim Daly, and David Lee. But they're cornered in the north of this Caribbean paradise. half of Montserrat is uninhabitable and is expected to remain so for a decade.